Welcome to episode 70 of Gods and Heroes of Ancient Greece. My name is MyLinda Butterworth, and today we continue with the tales of Troy with the story of Fighting Begins, Protesilaus and Cycnus. When the Argives were taking King Telephus and his retinue to his ship, the gates of Troy suddenly flew open, and the Trojan army in full battle array poured across the plain of Scamander. Under the leadership of Hector, they moved toward the fleet of the unsuspecting Danai without meeting resistance. Those of the Argives who were camped farthest from the shore seized their weapons and advanced in scattered groups, but they were quickly dispatched by the foe, who far outnumbered them. But even this brief struggle detained the Trojans long enough for the other Argives to assemble and advance on the enemy in formation. Now, the fighting began, but the fortunes of war were very uneven. For wherever Hector appeared, the Trojans gained the upper hand, but those Dardanian warriors who fought far from him were beaten and scattered by the Argives. Among the Achaean heroes slain by the sword of Aeneas was Protesilaus, and son of Iphicles. He had left for Troy as a youth, as the betrothed of the fair daughter of Achilles, the Argonaut, and he had been first to leap ashore at the landing. Now he was the first to die, and never would Laodamena hail the return of the bridegroom, to whom she had bidden such a sorrowful farewell. Achilles was still far from the battlefield. He had accompanied Telephus, the king of Mysia, first wounded and then healed by his spear, down to the sea, and with thoughtful eyes watched the ship as it sailed on and faded into the distance. Suddenly he felt a hand on his shoulder, and Patroclus, his friend and comrade in arms, cried, "Where have you been? The Argives need you. The fighting has begun. Hector, King Priam's eldest son, rages at the head of his troops like a lion whose den is surrounded by hunters. Aeneas, the king's son-in-law, has slain noble Protesilaus, your equal in youth and courage, though not in strength. If you do not come, more of our heroes will be killed." Achilles started from his dream. He turned and saw his friend, and at the same moment he heard the distant clash of battle. Without answering, he raced through the streets of the camp, making straight for his house. Once there, he found his tongue, called his Myrmidons to arms in ringing tones, and surged forward with them like storm wind and thunder. Even Hector could not withstand the force of this attack. The son of Peleus slew 2 sons of Priam, and from the walls the king mourned his children who had died at the hand of the Argive. Ajax fought close to Achilles. His tall form loomed above all the other Achaeans. With the strokes of those 2 heroes, the Trojans fled like a herd of deer before a pack of hounds. They retreated to their city, and the gates of Troy closed behind them. But the Danai calmly returned to their ships and continued building their camp. Agamemnon appointed Achilles and Ajax to guard the ships, and they in turn had other heroes watch the various parts of the fleet. Then they set about the burial of Protesilaus. They laid his body on a pyre, high heaped and adorned, and under tall elms with far-flung branches they buried his bones on the shore, where the land jutted out into the sea. Hardly had they finished performing the burial rites when a second attack surprised them, and in the midst of the funeral games. Colonnade near Troy was ruled by Cycnus. This king was a son of Poseidon, born to the sea, god by a nymph, and reared by a swan on the island of Tenedos. For this reason, he had been given the name of Cycnus, which means swan. He was an ally of Troy, and when he saw alien warriors landing, he considered himself duty-bound to come to the help of his old friend, even though King Priam had not summoned him. And so he assembled a sizable army, laid an ambush near the Argive camp, and had just settled into his hiding place when the Danai returned as victors from their first encounter with the Trojans and began to pay the last honors to their dead. As they stood around the pyre, far from fully armed and intent only on the solemn rites they were performing, they found themselves suddenly surrounded by war chariots and warriors, and before they had time to wonder whether the earth had spewed forth these fighters or where else they had come from, King Cycnus and his men had begun their ruthless slaughter. But only a part of the Argives had attended the burial of Protesilaus. The others, who were near the ships or in their huts, had their weapons close at hand, and headed by Achilles, swiftly came to the aid of their fellows in full armed serried ranks. Their leader, the son of Peleus, stood at his chariot, striking terror into all of those who beheld him, and with his death-bringing lance pierced now one, now another of the Achaeans, until, penetrating the enemy host, he discerned the commander-in-chief by the mighty thrust he dealt right and left, standing erect in his battle chariot. Toward him, Achilles drove his snow-white horses, and face to face with Cycnus, he swung his lance with sinewy arm, calling out, "Whoever you may be, let this comfort you in death, that it is Achilles, son of Thetis, who has struck you down." His lance followed close on his words, but though he had aimed straight and sure the point only grazed the breast of Poseidon's son with a final thud, Achilles measured his opponent with wondering eyes, for he seemed invulnerable. "Do not be so amazed," Cycnus said to him smilingly. "It is not my helmet which you are regarding with such astonishment, and not the hollow shield in my left hand which wards the strokes from my body. Or these merely for adornments, as Ares, the god of war, sometimes dons weapons in jest, for he does not need them to protect his immortal body. Even if I take off all my armor, your spear will not so much as scratch my skin. For from head to foot, I am hard as iron. And after all, you must realize that it means something to be not the son of a mere sea nymph, but the cherished son of him who rules over Nereus and all his daughters and all the seas. You are face to face with the son of Poseidon himself." And with these words, he cast his spears at Achilles. The point pierced his shield and passed through the bronze and 9 layers of oxide, but in the 10th it struck. Achilles shook his shield until the lance fell out, and in return hurled his at Cycnus, but still he was not harmed by it, and even the 3rd lance Achilles flung at him left him whole and sound. And now the son of Peleus grew furious as a bull who runs at a red cloth held up to tantalize him, and thrust his horns into empty air. Once more he aimed his lance carved of ash at his opponent, smote his left shoulder, and shouted with joy to see blood on it. But he did not exult for long, for the blood was not that of Poseidon's son. It came from a wound Myrmidons, fighting beside Cycnus, had received from another hand. Gnashing his teeth with rage, Achilles leaped from his chariot, made for his enemy, and lunged out at him with his sword. But even this powerful weapon rebounded from that iron flesh. Then, in despair, Achilles raised his shield with its 10 layers of hide, and brought the buckle down on the temple of his invulnerable foe 3, 4 times. And now Cycnus faltered, his vision blurred. He retreated in a few steps and stumbled over a stone. Achilles gripped him by the nape of the neck and threw him flat on the ground. And then, keeping his foe prostrate by pressing his shield and his knees against his breast, he strangled him with the strap of his own helmet. When they saw their leader fall, the Colonians lost courage and sped from the battlefield in frantic flight. All that was left was a welter of bodies, Argives and barbarians, scattered about the half finished burial mound of Protesilaus, and now the Argives mourned their dead and set about digging their graves. The aftermath of this encounter was that the Danai invaded the realm of King Cycnus from a capital, the city of Mentora, carried off his children as spoils. And they attacked the neighboring city of Cilia, conquered it also, though it was well fortified, and returned to their carefully guarded camp, laden with vast stores of priceless booty. And here ends my tale for today. But I'll be back tomorrow with more tales. Many more tales. Until then, my friends, enjoy the journey.